All right. So welcome to this webinar on maximizing the impact of your extracurricular activities. I'm Priyanka. I'm sure you all know this by now. So we're just going to skip a little forward onto the credentials of basically my contact info. And if at any point you have any questions, just post them in the chat, or my email address is on the screen. You've been receiving my emails because you're all listed in my newsletter. So you can just hit reply to any one of those. And I do read and respond to every single email. So you're not going to get, yeah, you're most likely not going to get lost in the mess. But yes, if you have any questions whatsoever, about any part of your college applications process, just shoot me an email and I'll see how I can help you out or direct you to the correct resource. All right. So the first question that I think we have is, what is an extracurricular? By definition, what counts as an extracurricular? And the simplest way to say it is, if it takes your time outside of school and you're growing through it, it counts. Now, let's make it a little more tangible. So what does that even mean? Well, your sports count, whether that is a club sport or through your school. Any sport counts. All the arts, theater, art, music, photography, graphic design, all of that counts. Any kind of job. So whether you're working at Tuscan Cup or Caroluzzi's or Stop and Shop or any kind of business, basically anywhere, whether it's online as a part-time job or it's in person, you're babysitting, all of that counts. Any sort of community service that you do, whether that's on Earth Day going to do a cleanup, beach cleanups, or in the Wilton area, there are park cleanups or just street cleanups. Any kind of packaging food to then give out to a certain organization, that matters. Honestly, anything that is considered community service falls under an extracurricular. Student organizations or clubs, basically, in school, all of those count. Okay. Hobbies and passion projects. So hobbies and passion projects, as an example, I've had students who've taught themselves guitar and they bought a guitar off of somebody they knew, and then they basically watched YouTube videos to teach themselves. Maybe it was because they're teaching or learning music for the first time ever, or it's because they play another instrument and now they wanted to transition over to another one, right? The guitar or a piano, whatever it might be. So they wanted to transition their knowledge over. That counts. Other passion projects could be, you might have a YouTube channel or a TikTok or an Instagram for something that you care about. It could be you have an Etsy page or a Depop shop if you're trying to give away your clothes or buy clothes, if fashion is an interest of yours. So ultimately, anything that you do outside of the classroom matters. All right. Other hobbies can also include baking, and we'll talk about a couple more of these in a bit. But ultimately, anything that you do that you genuinely invest your time in outside of the classroom matters, whether it is with an official organization or not. So family responsibilities also matter. Now, I do want to clarify that family responsibilities does not mean you did your chores. Okay. That is a bare minimum part of being a family. But we're going deeper into this and saying, okay, well, family responsibilities means that maybe I have to be home after school so that my parents are at work and grandma lives with us. So I need to make sure that grandma's okay and she's eaten or she's comfortable basically at home. And I've had a student in that category. Okay. Or maybe it's you have to be home after school because you have to go to the bus stop and wait for one of your younger siblings to get home and then help them get them situated ultimately at home before your parents get home from work. So numerous ultimately family responsibilities count if you could be doing another activity at that time, another sport maybe at that time, or maybe it's a music class, maybe it's a job, whatever else that you could be doing in that allocated time, you are now spending and dedicating towards your family. That matters. All right. Doing the dishes takes about 10 minutes, does not count. That's a normal part. It's a normal chore. All right. Then any kind of religious or community involvement, that matters. And then any kind of certifications or courses that you take outside of school. So whether that's dual enrollment, and this is something you would list more on your resume and not in the activities section of your application. But just as a note that having taken any extra classes and building any extra skill sets matters, and it counts towards your application. All right. Any questions so far? All right. Then when we're thinking on this, and by the way, this may be somewhat of a short presentation. We're going into depth, but I think a lot of it is you thinking about how you can take what you're already doing or what your teenager is already doing, and then adding an extra dimension to it. So just as a heads up. Now, when we are thinking of universities, what do college admissions officers look for when they look at your extracurriculars, when they look at all of the things you have listed out in your application? Yes, they do get a certain idea of who you are as a person. So maybe if you have been playing soccer for 5 years, okay, that gives them an idea that you work well in a team, that you are consistently showing up to practices and to games, and you genuinely enjoy it. So that falls into the longevity. Basically, how long have you been a part of this activity? Again, could be any one of those extracurricular activities. It does not have to be this team sport or this musical instrument. Second is the depth. So how far into it did you get? Did you move from participant to a leadership role? Or did you find an opportunity, even if it wasn't officially in a title form? So you didn't move from participant to leader in terms of, oh, I'm now officially the vice president of this club or a team captain. Maybe you don't have the official title, but did you even then find opportunities to show any kind of initiative or growth, navigate discomfort? Ultimately, did you stay in what was just comfortable for you and you kept that thing going? Or did you take a step back and say, okay, well, I'm used to this now. As intense as my practices are for my sport, I now know what to expect. As crazy as my team is, I now know how to navigate these dynamics because I've been part of this team for a year or 2 years. Now what? Okay, which takes us to the third part, which is demonstrated impact. Demonstrated impact basically means, did your involvement change or create, basically what were the results, right? Did you create any change? Did you lead a project of any kind? Did you mentor others? Did you fundraise in some way? Did you expand what already existed before, or did you help solve some kind of a problem? No, you don't have to do every single one of these, but pick one category that you'd want to have an impact into. And I intentionally left out the first two because it was going to overload the slide. So that we can think of this as tiers. Now, no, I want to specify that universities are not thinking in terms of these tiers. These tiers are simply to help you understand this concept. And every single university has a different way of measuring an applicant's candidacy. So some universities have some kind of a ranking or rating system for grades versus extracurriculars versus the different types of extracurriculars that they have versus SAT and ACT scores and the importance of those versus your college essay and where that rates and so on. So this is not a uniform system. This is simply something that I've come up with to help you understand sort of the breakdown and tiers of community service, or sorry, not community service, extracurriculars. Wow. You can tell it's kind of late in the day now, but to understand the different tiers and depth that you can go into for an extracurricular. So starting from the very beginning is bottom level is tier 4, which is you're a participant. You are going to these club meetings, you're attending maybe the basic volunteer opportunities because someone declared that, hey, we need 5 volunteers, and you volunteer to go. And then you're being directed as to what needs to get done. You get the job done, and once you're done, you're out. Okay, so it's simply showing up. That is important. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. That is very important, but just keep in mind that as time goes on, you should pick the 1 or 2 activities that you want to go higher and higher or deeper and deeper into. Then that takes us to tier number 3, which is consistent involvement and possibly even some sort of leadership. So basic, maybe it's team captain for a sport. Maybe in a student organization, you now have a position like secretary or treasurer, and maybe you are now a mentor to somebody. All right. If it's in a sport, maybe you're training somebody younger. If it's in academics, maybe you're a tutor. But ultimately, it's regular involvement. You're showing up to every meeting and you're doing something a little more than that. Then we go to tier 2, which is now you are definitely in a leadership position. So maybe it's a large and active club. Maybe it's a club that's not large and active, but you are trying to get it to large and active because You now sought out the leadership position, and this is the change you want to have. Maybe it is, again, once again, leading in a robotics team. It doesn't matter what the team is. It doesn't matter what the club is. The main point is that you are challenging yourself. You are pushing yourself and you are urging yourself to go one step above what you thought you were capable of. Okay. And then, of course, tier 1 is that rare, which again, I would recommend at least getting to tier 2 in one activity. Okay. Tier 1, that requires an intense level of dedication. And I highly recommend that for students who, if you know what it is you enjoy doing, don't force yourself into it, because to get to that rare national level, you have to put in a lot of hours. And if you are pushing yourself, then at that point, you're chugging along. You're not genuinely putting in your best effort and your best attitude into this activity. You're simply doing it because you feel it looks good for college. All right. One thing I want you to remember is that you don't have to do things simply because they look good for college. We're going to talk about this in a few slides, but you want to narrow down the things that you do. It doesn't mean you have to do 10 different activities. You are allowed to put 10 different activities into your Common App. That's actually the max cutoff. And then you can always attach a resume if you'd like. But quality is more important than quantity. So if you can have 2 different activities that you do and they're both meaningful to you, and you are at tier 3 or tier 4, or sorry, tier 2 up here at those activities, then that's enough. Okay. Again, the portion that you care about is the demonstrated impact. You have to show that you are putting into your time, energy, effort, all sorts of resources that you have and can think of into getting this activity to the next level. For example, if it's a club that's not working out, you're super interested in this topic, maybe it's environmental, maybe it's women's rights or LGBTQ, whatever it might be, and maybe at your high school, it's not that big of a deal. It doesn't get as much participation. And you want to make sure that you promote it, that you do make it into an active club. Okay, the time it's going to take you to do that, it almost turns into this part-time job type of thing. So yes, it's one activity, but it is taking a lot of your time. Maybe you have to create promotions on social media. Maybe that means you're creating videos and you have to create graphics, or you have to coordinate with the other team members to see, well, what else are we going to have? Are we going to have booths or tables somewhere at whatever school events? Or are we going to just use word of mouth? There are many, many options, and that's just the marketing part. Then you have to get to the content. What are we doing in these meetings and designing all those meetings? So if you see where I'm going with this, it's that just from marketing to the content itself, to what do you want the members to get out of it, to what activities are we going to host? Are we going to have fundraisers within this club? Are we going to have some kind of awareness drives for this particular organization? All of that, as simple as it sounds to say, yeah, I'm in the LGBTQ club. That sounds simple, but the work that went into it, the depth that went into it, the intensity that went into it says that this turned into something that was massively meaningful to you and required a lot of your time and energy. So don't be afraid to have just the 2 activities or 3 activities that you are very much into. All right. And then, of course, feel free to have clubs that you're just a member of, because it's interesting enough, but not so interesting that you'd want to keep moving up. All right. So for anybody who's a freshman, most freshmen tend to be just participants because they're still trying to get a feel for what's available at the high school. And a lot of them just join what their friends are joining. Then usually in sophomore year, they realize, okay, well, whatever my friends like, turns out I don't really like all of it. Some of it's kind of boring. It's not me. And they start exploring. As you keep exploring, particularly as you get to junior year, you want to make sure you're somewhere for one activity at minimum in this tier 2 category. All right. Before I move on, do we have any questions in the chat? All right. So now let's open this up. How do we turn seemingly mundane activities into meaningful ones? So if you can post in the chat, or you can unmute yourselves, because I think we do have a pretty small group right now, but if you can post in the chat, what types of activities are you involved in? I know we have one student who said he's working at a local grocery store and he volunteers with an organization, packing meals. What else do we have? Let's get some ideas. Okay, we have a church youth group. And with the faith-based, I think some students are just very hesitant to talk about their faith and their activities. And okay, so we have 2 sports. Anybody else? Okay, so we have 2 sports, chemistry club. All right. Now the question becomes, great, this is it's already existing, and our teenagers, or if you're the teenager, you're participating. The question now is, how do we take it a step further? How do we level up in that activity? I tried to make this slide and into, like a custom animated so that half of this shows up when I feel like it, or when I hit next, instead of overloading us, but turns out I can't do that when I have a table. So it either all shows up or all of it disappears. So let's start just with a couple of common examples. And I'll give you examples of what my students have done along the way as well. So for example, if you're volunteering, you have a key club. Usually it means some kind of volunteering gig, right? Not just key club, but some kind of volunteering where you're simply told, here's where you need to be, here's what we're going to be working on, and here's the time that you need to be there, here's when it will end, here's the cause. Done. Once you're out of there, wrap it up, good to go home, don't have to think about it again. So if that's basically what your organization or club requires, then how do you take it to the next level? One, you can come up with your own initiative and suggest it. That's assuming it's a key club where you come up with different causes to fundraise for. You can fundraise yourself for a local cause. So one of my students, actually a couple of students. So one of them ended up this was a few years back, and she very, very really wanted to go into West Point, and she's very into the military culture. It was a little bit out of nowhere because no one in her family has served in the military or in the armed forces, but she wanted to go in, and her older sister was already in, but she also wanted to go in. And what she used to do, and she did this because she cared about it, which is the one thing I want to emphasize, is you should not do things simply because they look good for college. Find things you care about. And if you don't know what it is you care about, try a lot of different things until something just sparks. But you won't find out what you care about until you've experimented and gone through that trial and error process. Hey. Hello? Okay. So make sure that you are trying. Now, what she used to do is that every year at the end of the school year, she would have a fundraiser for vets, and it was called Push for Vets. So they would be doing push-ups. I was invited. I refused to do push-ups, but you basically, donate to the cause, and then there's like a push-up competition. They just make it like a fun, back in the day, we used to have walkathons where in the school track, we would just gather around and just walk around the school's track. We didn't even go out of town. We just go in the school's track. But she did something similar, but it was Push for Vets. And she organized the whole thing. She coordinated with the organization that she was going to be donating to. She made sure she talked to the teachers in the school to use the premises and to figure out where to get the tables and whatever else is necessary for the food, or just coordinated on some kind of foods and drinks services, so on. It was once a year, but of course, the planning takes months leading up to it. But she used to do that once a year. Okay. So again, massive, it was a big event for her, lots of planning for a teenager to be in charge of. Yes, she had some help from family, but her family was just following her instructions. They were not the ones suggesting and leading. So that's an example of fundraising for a cause that's how she took initiative. And she did end up going to West Point, and I'm glad. I think she should be graduating this year. Another student, so more recently, I've had students, actually in the sports examples, but they're hosting sports equipment drives. So I've had soccer students host drives for soccer equipment, and then they might take it over to an elementary school or a middle school, high school in Bridgeport or in Danbury. Or one of my students wants to donate to Egypt, just through a friend who's going to be visiting there over the summer, etc. But it's like a chain reaction type of thing. They're going to fundraise here, collect all the sneakers and gear, cleat drive, and then take it over to Egypt, where a friend is already going for one of his community service projects through his church. So notice that it's doable. It does take time, because now all of these teenagers have to figure out how to market their cause. They have to figure out where it's going to go to. Parents, if you're the ones on the call, don't make the phone calls for your teenagers. Teach them, have them call the organizations and coordinate. Hey, we would like to donate cleats. Hey, we would like to donate sports equipment. Hey, I'm a theater student and I would love to come in and work with your elementary school kids after school program. Have the teenagers make the phone calls. All right. It's good practice. It builds a skill that I think we're starting to lack in a texting and typing generation, which is just talking on the phone and getting comfortable, being uncomfortable in the beginning. So have the teens organize it. But those are examples. Build partnership with nonprofits. Robotics club, again, you can teach coding to middle schoolers. I've actually had, was it a student? It was a student who reached out to the libraries to see if she can host coding sessions. And that could be for, and instead of middle schoolers, she actually wanted to do it for sort of the older age group. So, because they're usually the ones who get neglected when it comes to computer skills. So that's one of the things she did. I had another student, he didn't do robotics, but he is very into videography, photography, just filmmaking and design, video making and design. And we have a teen center in Wilton, Trackside, and he hosted classes for middle schoolers there. Of course, then he comes back to me and says, yeah, I can't do that again. Middle schoolers are hard to teach. But lesson learned, right? He had to come up with the entire curriculum, what was going to happen. He had to coordinate with Trackside to see if they'd be willing to host him and these teenagers, these middle schoolers, host sessions for them and such. So think about what it is you can do. And I believe, oh no, one of my other students, actually not necessarily for robotics, but she did build just actually a couple of students. They've built websites to show their work. And that was just a basic Google page website. So Google already has the templates laid out. So it just makes it easy to have something to showcase. And if you do have a website that showcases work, it's easy to post your link into your resume or into the additional information section of your application. So that's another option, right? And once again, if you're in sports, we've talked about the mentoring, we've talked about hosting equipment drives. But again, see, you can also, when we say mentoring younger players, you can take it a step further. And I've had students do this where there's there are organizations like Dig Soccer, or I forget which other ones. When I need them, they don't come to me, but organizations that either work with youth who are just not fortunate enough to have all of these sports available at their school. Maybe they just don't have the time or the finances to be able to go into that sport. So some of my students have gone and volunteered with them once a week. Maybe it's in Bridgeport, maybe it's in Danbury. I've had them go both ways. Or maybe it's working with autistic kids and once again, playing sports with them. And as one of my students said, it was just so rewarding to work with the autistic or just all of these kids, because sometimes their parents are sitting in the stands and they're laughing and they're having fun and they're enjoying it, because to them, this is a break as well. They're getting a break. They know their child is occupied and having fun while at it. And my teenagers or my students feel relieved, or just they feel like they had an impact on someone's life. So that's another way you can use your sport. Notice I'm not saying that, oh, if you're in sport, then go join theater. Okay. I'm not saying you have to jump the activities completely and go completely out of left field and be super uncomfortable. Oops, I hit my paper on the wall, but be super uncomfortable. I'm not saying that. You can use the activity that you have currently and then go the extra step within that activity, should you choose to. All right. Part-time jobs. So if you have a part-time job, this is another common one. And I know I skipped the theater one, but again, it follows the same theme. But with jobs, part-time jobs, I've had a lot of students who say they want to go into business. And if you have a part-time job, you're working for a business. So figure out how this business works. Don't simply be that employee who goes in, clocks out, yay, I got paid, and how am I going to spend my money? Don't be that person. You're going to be spending time there anyway. Go the extra depth and say, okay, well, how does this business work? How are they working with the staffs? How are they ensuring that customers want to come here? Because whatever business you're working for, whether that's an ice cream store, whether that is a summer camp, whether that's a grocery store, coffee shop, any business, there was another one that customer could have gone to, another grocery store they could have gone to, another ice cream shop they could have gone to. So what you want to ask yourself is, okay, why do customers want to come here? What is it that this business is doing that is appealing to their clientele? So again, if you're a student who wants to go into business, even if you don't want to go to business, go into and figure out the deeper understanding. gain an in-depth knowledge of what it is that you're working in. What atmosphere are you working in? What does it take to run that? And then tutoring, of course. Okay, and I see the question in the chat. So question, which is, how much impact does a simple Etsy shop make? Depends. So I want to say, it's not about the YouTube channel. It's not about the Depop shop or the Etsy shop. It's how detailed did you get into it? You can have an Etsy shop that you created for the sake of it. And actually, something similar is the trend that used to be teenagers starting nonprofits, which that's why I said build partnerships, don't start your own nonprofit, but where teens would start nonprofits and they just did it because it looked good for college and they wanted to get into the top tier universities. So this was the approach. It's even college counselors or admissions officers, like college counselors like myself, would probably encourage people to make students to make nonprofits. I've never done that because you'll see why in a second. But ultimately, with Etsy shops, with nonprofits, it's not that you created it. It's how much time did you spend cultivating it? What skills did you pick up along the way? To run an Etsy shop, you are one in thousands that are listed, whatever services you provide, right? Maybe it's your woodworking, maybe it's your jewelry design, maybe it's clothing, embroidery, whatever it is you design. What is it that you did to make it appeal to a client base? How much time did you spend playing with your wording in your profile, creating pictures for your profile, testing it out to say, okay, this seems to garner interest. This does not seem to garner interest. Then did you spend time collecting reviews? What kind of service did you provide? Do people come back to you? All right. Did you go through every single one of those steps in detail? And yes, it might be a one line on your extracurriculars that says you did the Etsy shop, but then you get to explain the whole bandwidth, just the entire range of different activities and roles you had to play to ensure that this Etsy shop was successful. And maybe it's not successful. Maybe it is something you are still learning and you are figuring it out. Okay, but do you know what your trials and errors and experiments and what worked, what didn't work? Do you have a log of that? Okay, are you consistently trying? That's what we want from any activity you do, whether it is an Etsy shop, whether it is a volunteering, whether it's a sport. It's simply a matter of, did you gather skill? Again, going with the Etsy shop example, or even let's say my business. I have to spend hours watching marketing videos on YouTube or joining other webinars to learn skills, whether it's marketing, whether it's content writing, whether it's content on the college stuff itself, right? And that's just a bit and piece of it. But then I have to learn packaging for services. I have to learn maybe asking for reviews. Not great at that, or testimonials. There are things I'm not good at. There are things I am good at. But the thing is that you have the one service that you're providing. Again, maybe it's within your Etsy shop, but then there's a whole chain of other skills that you end up having to pick up. And that's what matters. So every single one of your extracurricular activities can have an impact, no matter which department you work within, because it's about the skills you are acquiring. A lot of people will simply start the thing. And while it still seems new and shiny, they'll continue. And then the moment it gets boring, they're done. Okay. And I'm okay with that as long as you genuinely decide this is not a thing for me. Again, part of that trial error to figure out what you like doing process. But if you do think it's important enough to you, then are you that person who's going to procrastinate repeatedly and then not get it anywhere, but simply claim that you care about this? Which I've had students do this. And I'm sure once we start college essays next month, it's going to come up again, where students will claim that they do care about a certain cause or they do care about the certain activity, but then their record doesn't back it up, because records say they're doing the bare minimum possible to be a part of this activity. All right. That's kind of where we're going with this, is don't do the bare minimum possible. Pick the one or two things you go in detail. I hope that answers your question. Anything else? Okay, so as you do these activities, one of the first questions you want to ask yourself is, what do I care about? And these are examples from real students. So I've had a student who does care about women's rights and women's. So what she did is she actually, and this is the nice part when I do start working with students earlier on, is that if you're in ninth grade, 10th grade, and going into 11th, I get to help you shape your entire process, as opposed to when I get the seniors next month, I'll simply have to teach them how to package it. I wouldn't be able to help them shape their process. But she's into women's rights. And one of the things that we started working on is, what if yes, you join the club at your school, but then maybe you reach out to women in business and interview them, and maybe have a podcast interview, just a YouTube channel or something. Record, basically do a Zoom, record it, post it somewhere. We're keeping it simple, but now you have to go find that business person maybe every quarter, excuse me, or maybe every month, however frequently you want to start. But again, you can always start slow and then work your way up. But when you care about the cause, you're more likely to do the work. I had another student who really cared about gun control, gun laws, and she ended up joining the Connecticut, it's a CAGB, Connecticut Against Gun Violence, I believe it's a nonprofit. And she ended up becoming one of the team members. Had to write a lot of letters, appeal to different politicians, show up at different locations to present. Ultimately, she ended up going to Georgetown. So this is a current senior who's next year going to be starting college, but because she genuinely cares about it, she deep dive into it. Yes, she had a bunch of other activities, and honestly, a lot of them we wrote it in the activity section, but we never expanded upon most of these, because she had the one activity she deep dive into. All right. And she is going to be going to Georgetown next year. So that's an idea. What do you genuinely care about? And again, if you don't know, that's okay. You have all these other questions to think about, which is, how has this activity changed me? So if you've been, let's say, playing this musical instrument for 8 years, okay, well, at some point you are learning the new notes, you can tell I'm not a music person. Never taken it. I mean, outside of elementary school, I haven't taken the music classes, but let's say you are learning the different notes and symphonies and flows and working with the different instruments around you and orchestra and such. Okay, but if you've been doing this for more than 2 years, you now know the sequence. You are now used to this. So do you have an activity that is having some kind of impact, is pushing a change or urging a change in you? All right, that's one way to look at it. Then, what problems did you help solve? And it doesn't have to be something super massive. It could be, in theater, you are a stage manager. And with theater, every performance, you're basically reassigning the roles. So it's almost a shuffle up. Everything's up for grabs. You could be in lighting one time, and you could be an actor the next performance, and you can be a stage or a run crew the next time. So you can shuffle it up. Well, maybe when you were in, let's say, set design, there was a last minute issue with whatever. Maybe the set fell apart last minute, and that was a problem. And you learned how to navigate that issue in a very stressful atmosphere. Maybe that's a problem you learn to solve. Or maybe it's a system issue that, okay, you know what? We had a process of doing this and it just wasn't working because we were all constantly yelling at each other. So instead, I made the suggestion and we're going to follow through by doing X, Y, and Z to make sure it runs smoothly. All right. It can be something small. It could be something big. Of course, while you're still in 9th grade, 10th grade, start small. Test it out. See what you care about. And then pick whatever it is that you want to go bigger into. Of course, how did you show initiative? This is by far one of the hardest things to nail down with teenagers. And I find out for a lot of them during their college essays, because a lot of the students I get are the ones who are working on their applications. So maybe or around this time. So starting next month, the seniors will come in, and at that point, they've already, had their activities and everything done, and we're packaging. And one of the kerfuffles we come across is, well, where have you shown initiative? What do you enjoy doing? Where have you gone above and beyond in something you do? And there isn't much of an answer, because a lot of the teenagers are spending a lot of time on their phones, or it's a lot of checking the box to say I'm doing it, but not because I care about it. So again, this takes me back to do few activities, but at least pick one that you're showing some kind of initiative in. It could be your job as a barista or a waitress or a waiter or a host at a restaurant. That's okay. The title of what you do does not need to be fancy. It's how you do, or what you do and how you do it when you are there. Okay. And then who benefited from your work? And finally, does this activity help you explore potential career paths? So in this case, that's again an option. There are there's to genuinely care about, there's also a potential career path. So as an example of potential career paths, student in filmmaking, he really wants to go into, shocking, film studies. And one of the things we're doing, and I encourage them to do, is, you know what, go freelance and design videos as a freelance, videographer or social media content creator. Go freelance, offer local businesses, offer to make promo videos for local businesses, just something to help them market themselves while you get to build your portfolio. That's one thing you can do. And then again, this could be done for free just to help you get your foot in the door, and then you can start charging. So because we started working together a few years ago, he gets paid work because he started for free, and then now he can charge because he has enough of a portfolio. But that's one way to explore a potential career path. I've also had students who, again, if you want to go into business, work for a business. If you want to go into computer science, maybe it is that you take the coding class, or you teach yourself how to code or design a website. Maybe you go on to Coursera and get like a UX UI design certification or some kind of data analytics. Ultimately, if you can, figure out how you can find activities that help you explore potential areas of interest. Okay, it doesn't have to be a career path you genuinely care about. Again, if you're very into the natural and environmental, maybe you work at one of the nature centers. So options exist, but we have to be very intentional as to how we shape our extracurriculars. Again, not all of them, but pick the one or two that you're being intentional about. And then the rest you can just do for fun. Maybe the sport you do and you dedicate hours and hours of your time to is just for fun, and that's all you want to leave it at. Okay, find this other thing that you do that does take up more of your time. That is where you show your initiative. Okay, I hope this makes sense. The whole premise is I don't want you to have to do the 12 different things or 20 different things. Simply pick the 5 different things that you enjoy, and of those, go into detail and in depth into the 1 or 2. And most importantly, write it all down. If you're working at the grocery store, great. Create an Excel sheet. And usually for my students, we have a template, but it's simple. Just on a Google Doc, on a Google Sheet, wherever you want to have it, just write down the activity, write down what you did, write down the skills that you picked up along the way. Did you mess up and I had a student who worked in an ice cream shop, and she just thought, oh, it's so boring. I didn't really do anything. This is like the information I get when we're talking college essays and topics we can write about. So I usually ask them, okay, well, what did you do? Let's get all of this information in so that we know what we're working on. And that way we can pick and choose what we want to write about in your college essay. So a lot of students will do this. Oh, I was just a camp counselor. I was just working at a grocery store or ice cream shop. And for the ice cream shop, I said, okay, great. Did you ever have rush hour? And she said, yeah, of course, it's summer. Okay. And did you mess up everybody's orders during that rush hour? She said, no, of course not. I get fired. I make a big mess. I said, okay, so you learned how to work in a high pressure situation. That was a high stress situation. You had to make sure you were going, and getting everything correct, so you're not getting in trouble. And then she said, yeah, well, I didn't think of it that way. And that's what it comes down to, is a lot of the skills that you require. Somebody who works at the grocery store, I asked him, this guy, did you ever get yelled at by somebody? And he said, yeah, I have. And I said, was it your fault? He said, no, they just started yelling at me. And I said, okay, great. What did you do? Did you yell right back at them? And he said, no, absolutely not. I can't just do that. Okay, so what'd you do? And now you learn customer service. You can't lose it just because the person in front of you might have had a bad day or something happened and it triggered them and you just happen to be in front of them. So what is it that you're learning? You might not think it's meaningful. That's okay. just write it down. What skills are you learning? What was the craziest thing you might have experienced? How much are you navigating? Somebody who works as a waiter or waitress, I asked them, okay, well, do you have to navigate different allergies? Do you have to navigate people sending their food back? And sometimes they say, yeah, people don't, you see the people who fake it, will just be like, no, there's hair in my food or something. And there wasn't originally. And now they have claims. And okay, then I asked my student, okay, well, how do you navigate something like that? So what it comes down to is, no matter what you're doing, just keep track. You might think it's boring. You might think it's dry. You might think it's basic. But every single one of your projects is shaping you in some way, shape, or form. So just keep records. Better to have more information to work with than less. You can always filter later. Now, I see the question in the chat, which is how important is it having an ARC or passion project where everything is coming together for your application? So one thing I would say, and probably the most important thing, I think, is it depends on the types of universities you want to apply to. Let me actually, so in the recap, it's not the recap I want. It's, you know what, let's just stick to this. But if you're applying to a highly competitive university, we're talking Tufts, Georgetowns, Northeasterns, Boston College, Boston universities, all of these are universities that I've had students apply to and get into. But then I've also had students who wanted to apply to University of Virginia or University of Georgia or University of South Carolina, Texas Christian University. So we're talking very, very different admissions rates, okay? Different competitiveness levels. So speaking to the universities that are highly competitive, actually even across the board, it is important to have that one project that you are working on, okay? Whatever that might be. Whether you call it a big passion project where you went super in-depth all in, that's up to you. Or whether it's taking the extracurricular that already exists and then leveling that up. So how and what approach you took is completely up to you, whether you created your own project and went super into it, or whether you took something that pre-existed and just made it better. But the point is you need to have something where you showed growth and initiative in that particular project, whether it was a sport or an Etsy shop or a church or a youth group thing, whatever it is, you have to have something where you show that you were responsible, you showed up, you challenged yourself emotionally to learn skills that didn't pre-exist, you got yourself uncomfortable, you didn't simply rely on mom and dad to make the phone calls for you, send the emails for you, talk to their friends who done talk to their friends and set things up for you. It wasn't like that. Okay, it was that you made the phone calls, you faced the rejections, and now you had to learn how to navigate all these rejections to get that one yes for whatever project that might be. In fact, a lot of universities love it when students are in Eagle Scouts, because part of Eagle Scouts is that the boys have to do this one project when they're in high school, and they have to come up with the project, they have to come up with the proposal, they have to come up with the budget breakdown, they have to get all the permissions from whoever. I had a student who made a fence for one of his for the local fire department. Again, that all of those systematic, basically project management skills that the student is acquiring, that's really what universities would love to see. All right. So, and if it's an ARC or a passion project, whatever it is you enjoy doing and you started it, the question then becomes, are you going to continue once you go to university? Or is this something that you're just going to drop the moment you get into the university because you only did it so you could get into a good university? All right. Now, there is some flexibility in how deeply and how intense you get if the universities you're applying to have, let's say, a 70% or higher acceptance rate, because at that point, they may be prioritizing more of your SAT scores and GPAs, and they care that you did activities outside of class, but they may not be as intensely concerned about the depth that you might have gone into. But having this depth, having these activities, the one or two activities that you've shown all those characteristics I mentioned, that's only going to play in your favor, regardless of whether you're applying to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Tufts, Georgetown, etc., or you're applying to UConn. It will only play in your favor to be able to say, I have these skills, I played full out, I cared about this, and here's what I'm capable of. I learned what I was capable of. All right. Any questions on anything so far? And we're almost done. So maybe this was a little bit longer of a presentation than I originally thought. That's good to know. This is the first time I've actually just separated out extracurriculars and made it a topic of its own. But I'm going to go through all of the slides just to make sure that you've gotten all the information. And if you have questions along the way, just post them in the chat and I'll make sure I address them before we round out everything. So remember, extracurriculars are all of the things you do outside of the classroom: sports, jobs, arts, even if it's arts on your own and not officially part of the art club or something, family responsibilities, hobbies, etc. Universities are looking for 3 topics. And again, it doesn't have to be, you don't have to hit the mark on longevity if you make up for it with depth and demonstrated interest. A common question I do get is, hey, I've been doing this for 5 years, 7 years. And you know what? I am done. I'm done playing the piano. I don't want to play the piano anymore. Is it okay if I quit, or does this look bad for college? And for those students, I've basically said, it's okay if you quit, but you should find another activity to replace that with. So it's okay that you quit. But once again, you still have to show or want to show depth and demonstrated impact in one of your activities. So maybe it's not in playing the piano. Maybe it's not in playing the piano at a nursing home once a week or once a month. Maybe that's not your thing anymore and you're exhausted. Okay, that's okay. What is the other activity? So that's, and then of course, this tier system as just a, down below, level 4, level 3, which is a little more involvement in leadership, level 2, getting more and more leadership. And then of course, for the activities that do actually offer it and you're interested enough to put your all in, go all in, is the rare national awards. Okay. And then we have seemingly mundane things. So we saw a couple of examples of just common activities students do, and then how you can take it above and beyond. Reflection questions that you might want to think about when you are doing an activity, and make sure that you're writing it all down. Keep your records. They make life significantly easier when we're getting down to your college applications and your resume. Now you don't have to sit and think about what it is you did. You already wrote it down while it was happening live. The emotion that you're writing about, you're writing it when it happened live, not because you're thinking about what you did a year ago or 5 months ago. All right. And at the end of the day, remember that you don't need to do everything. You need to do something with heart, hustle, and a hunger to grow. Universities want depth, not just boxes checked off. So don't try to do everything. Just pick the few that genuinely matter to you. And of course, go through the trial and error process to figure out what it is that matters. All right. So with that said, any questions on anything? And of course, as a reminder, if you do come up with questions later, just feel free to email me. My email is on the screen. And thank you so much for attending.